Today we're going to talk about quantifiers. Quantifiers are words that help us explain how much, or how many of something we have. We use them with countable nouns, such as apples, strawberries, or ingredients, and with uncountable nouns, such as money, flour, or time. Quantifiers are very useful in everyday communication, especially when we talk about food, cooking, and quantities of things. First, remember that countable nouns are things we can count individually, such as strawberries, pineapples, ingredients, or soft drinks. Uncountable nouns are things we cannot count separately, such as flour, sugar, money, or information. Quantifiers help us describe the quantity of both types. Some common quantifiers are some, many, much, a lot of, a few, and a little. Let's start with a few and few. We use a few with plural countable nouns and it means some, or a small number, but in a positive way. For example, we bought a few strawberries for the cake. A few friends came to the barbecue. I added a few herbs to the soup. However, few without the article a has a negative meaning, and it means not many. For example, few people eat cabbage every day. Few guests tried the coconut dessert. So, a few sounds positive, while few suggests that the number is smaller than expected. Now let's look at a little and little. These are used with uncountable nouns. A little means some, or a small amount. For example, I need a little flour to bake the cake. There is a little sugar in the recipe. She drank a little soft drink with dinner. But little without a has a negative meaning, meaning almost none. For example, there is little milk left in the fridge. He had little time to cook dinner. Again, the difference is that a little sounds positive, while little sounds negative. Another very common group of quantifiers is a lot of, lots of, and loads of. These expressions mean a large quantity, and we can use them with both countable and uncountable nouns. For example, there are a lot of strawberries in the market today. We have lots of flour for baking. They bought loads of food for the barbecue. In informal conversation, lots of and loads of are very common. A similar expression is plenty of, which means more than enough. For example, there is plenty of beef for everyone. We have plenty of ingredients to cook dinner. In more formal English, we sometimes use expressions like a large amount of, a great deal of, and a large number of. A large amount of and a great deal of are used with uncountable nouns. For example, she spent a great deal of time preparing the meal. The recipe requires a large amount of flour. In contrast, a large number of is used with plural countable nouns. For example, a large number of people came to the food festival. A large number of restaurants serve grilled beef. Another useful expression is hardly any, which means very little, or almost none. It often has a negative feeling and is the opposite of plenty of. For example, there was hardly any food left after the barbecue. We had hardly any strawberries for dessert. There was hardly any ice in my soft drink. We can also use so much, and so many to emphasize very large quantities. We use so much with uncountable nouns, and so many with plural countable nouns. For example, there is so much flour in the recipe. He eats so much beef. There were so many ingredients in the dish. The chef prepared so many delicious desserts. Finally, let's talk about enough. The quantifier enough means a sufficient quantity of something. It can be used in positive sentences, negative sentences, and questions. For example, there is enough bread for lunch. She has enough ingredients to cook the meal. There aren't enough strawberries for everyone. I don't have enough sugar to bake the cake. In all these cases, enough shows that the quantity is sufficient or insufficient. To summarize, quantifiers help us describe quantity and amount. Words like a few, a little, a lot of, plenty of, hardly any, so many, so much, and enough allow us to speak more precisely about food, ingredients, and everyday situations. Learning how to use these quantifiers correctly will help you communicate more clearly when you talk about cooking, eating, shopping, and daily life.